True mates are supposed to be a werewolf's greatest blessing, but when Sylvie's fated mate, the cruelest alpha in the realm, marked her only to shatter her soul, she did the unthinkable. She ran to the Lichen King. She begged for sanctuary. She never expected what he would demand. The history books in the Grand Library of the Iron Ridge Pack always described the mate bond as a sudden strike of golden lightning, a warm, encompassing glow that told a wolf they had finally found their home. They lied. When the scent of cedar and dark rain hit Sylvie's senses during the winter solstice feast, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a death sentence. Sylvie Mercer was an Omega, but not the helpless, cowering kind sung about in tavern ballads. Her father had been the pack's chief archivist before the winter fever took him. She earned her keep in the castle by managing the ledgers, tracking the grain silos, and keeping the Alpha's sprawling estate from crumbling under its own weight. She was invisible, useful, and entirely content with her quiet life. Until the night Gideon Blackwood locked eyes with her across the Great Hall. Gideon was the newly ascended Alpha of Iron Ridge. He was a man carved from granite and ambition, known for his ruthless border expansions and his complete lack of mercy. As his gaze locked onto hers, the chaotic noise of the feast, the clashing of silver goblets, the roar of drunken warriors, the crackle of the massive hearth fell dead, silent in her ears. The mate bond snapped into place, dragging her forward against her will. Sylvie saw the exact moment realization hit him. His eyes, a pale, icy blue, flared with the golden light of his inner wolf, but almost instantly, the gold was swallowed by a tidal wave of disgust. She was an Omega, a ledger keeper with ink-stained fingers and a frayed wool dress. He was an Alpha who needed a powerful alliance to secure his tyrannical rule. He didn't pull her into his arms. He didn't speak of destiny. He gripped her jaw, his claws breaking the skin of her cheek, and leaned in close so only she could hear the venom in his voice. "You are a mistake," Gideon whispered, the scent of his anger suffocating her lungs. "A cosmic joke. I will not have my lineage tainted by weak blood." Before she could even process the shattering of her heart, he dragged her to the center of the hall. The music abruptly stopped. Hundreds of pack members watched as Gideon threw her to the cold stone floor. "I, Gideon of House Blackwood," his voice boomed, echoing off the vaulted ceilings, "reject you, Sylvie Mercer, as my fated mate and Luna." The physical agony was instantaneous. It felt as though someone had driven a heated iron spike through her sternum. Sylvie screamed, clutching her chest as the spiritual tether between them violently frayed. But the true horror was yet to come. To complete a rejection, both wolves must accept it. Before she could choke out the words to free herself, Gideon stepped forward and clamped his heavy boot down on her wrist, shattering the bone. "However," Gideon continued, looking out at his silent, terrified pack, "the moon goddess has placed her in my hands. I do not waste resources. You are rejected as my equal, Sylvie, but you will remain here. You are my property, bound by the half-severed tie. You will scrub the floors, you will bleed for my hounds, and you will serve my new Luna." From the shadows emerged Lady Beatrice of the Silver Pine Pack, a cruel, high-born alpha female whose dowry included 300 seasoned warriors. She looked down at Sylvie with a smirk that promised hell. For 3 weeks, Sylvie lived in a nightmare. A half-severed mate bond is a rotting disease. Because Gideon had initiated the rejection but forcefully prevented her from accepting it, her wolf was trapped in a state of dying. Her hair began to fall out. Her skin turned a sickly, translucent gray. She was relegated to the lowest dungeons, forced to work until her hands bled, sustained only by scraps tossed by Beatrice's guards. Gideon visited the dungeons merely to let his aura crush her, feeding his own wolf's dominance on her submission. She was dying. She knew it. The pack physician, Dr. Thomas Eris, knew it too. Thomas was an older beta, a man who had loved her father like a brother. One night, while the pack celebrated Gideon and Beatrice's formal union, Thomas slipped into the scullery. "You have days, Sylvie," Thomas whispered, his hands trembling as he wrapped a heavy wool cloak around her shivering shoulders. He pressed a small leather pouch of dried meat and a crumpled map into her hands. "The bond sickness is eating your organs. If you stay, you die. If you run, he will hunt you." "Then I am dead either way," she croaked, her voice rough from disuse. "There is one place his jurisdiction ends," Thomas said, his eyes wide with a desperate, fearful light. "The northern reaches, the Winter Court. You must go to the Lichen King, King Cassian Vane." The name alone was a ghost story used to frighten young pups into obedience. He was an ancient lichen, older than the unified Pax, ruling a territory of endless ice and shadow. He was said to be a monster who drank the blood of insubordinate alphas. He hates Omegas, she whispered, terrified. He will kill me at the gates. Cassian Vane hates arrogance more, Thomas replied grimly. Gideon has been dodging the king's tithes for 2 years. Bring the king your story. Offer him your ledgers, your knowledge of Gideon's hidden armories. Buy your life, Sylvie. That night, under the cover of a blinding blizzard, she fled. The journey was an exercise in pure agony. Every mile she put between herself and Gideon stretched the rotting tether of their bond, sending spasms of blinding pain through her nervous system. She crossed frozen rivers, hid from tracking patrols, and rubbed snow on her skin to numb the burning fever of the bond sickness. She survived on frozen berries and sheer, unadulterated spite. She refused to let Gideon win. On the 7th day, delirious and frostbitten, she crossed the jagged obsidian markers of the winter court. The air here was different, heavy, crackling with ancient magic and the terrifying scent of pure, undiluted power. She didn't make it far. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed into the deep snow. As darkness pulled her under, she felt massive hands grab her cloak, and the deep, rumbling growls of lichen border guards filled her ears. Warmth. That was the first thing that registered. A deep, penetrating heat that seeped into her aching bones. Sylvie gasped, her eyes flying open, expecting the damp stone of Gideon's dungeons. Instead, she found herself staring up at a vaulted ceiling painted with constellations of crushed lapis lazuli and gold. She was lying on an enormous fur rug before a roaring hearth, large enough to roast a whole ox. She wakes. The voice didn't just fill the room. It vibrated against her ribcage. Sylvie scrambled backward, ignoring the screaming pain in her half-healed wrist, and pressed herself against a massive pillar of dark marble. Sitting in a high-backed chair carved from the bones of some massive, extinct beast was King Cassian Vane. The rumors had failed to capture the sheer, suffocating gravity of his presence. He wasn't a monster of twisted flesh. He was terrifyingly beautiful. His hair was the color of raven feathers, falling past his broad shoulders, and his eyes were pools of liquid silver that seemed to pierce straight through her flesh to read the secrets of her soul. He wore dark leathers and a heavy velvet mantle, entirely unbothered by the blazing fire nearby. Beside him stood a tall, stern-faced lichen in a military tunic, Captain Miller, the commander of the King's Guard. An Omega of the Iron Ridge Pack, Cassian mused, leaning forward. The simple movement made her inner wolf whimper in absolute submission. Crosses my borders half dead, reeking of sickness and the foul stench of an alpha who doesn't know how to clean his own kills. Explain. Sylvie forced herself to her knees. Her body trembled so violently her teeth chattered, but she remembered Thomas's words. She had to offer him something. "Your Majesty," she rasped, bowing her head so low her forehead touched the warm stone floor. "My name is Sylvie Mercer. I am the fated mate of Alpha Gideon Blackwood." A low, dangerous hum filled the room. Cassian didn't speak, but Captain Miller stepped forward. "Gideon Blackwood just wed Lady Beatrice of Silver Pine. You are a liar, Omega, or a discarded whore." "I am his fated mate," she repeated, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "He rejected me to marry her for her army. But he refused to let me complete the severing. He kept me as a slave, letting the bond rot me from the inside." She lifted her head, pulling the collar of her borrowed tunic aside to reveal the blackened, infected veins, webbing up her neck toward her jaw, the physical manifestation of the broken bond. Cassian's silver eyes narrowed. He stood up, and the sheer height of him was staggering. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to one knee before her. He didn't ask for permission. He reached out with a large calloused hand and gripped her jaw, tilting her head. His touch was shockingly warm, and unlike Gideon's, it didn't seek to crush. He inhaled deeply against her neck, analyzing the scent of her trauma, the magic of the bond, and the sickness. "He defied the goddess's laws to hoard power," Cassian murmured, his voice deadly quiet, "and he leaves his rot on my doorstep." "I beg you," she whispered, tears finally spilling hot down her cheeks. "Hide me. Put me in your lowest kitchens. Let me vanish. He is expanding his borders, forging illegal weapons. My father was the archivist. I have a photographic memory of every ledger, every hidden iron mine, every illegal alliance Gideon has made in the last 5 years. I give it all to you. Just hide me from him." Cassian released her chin and stood, towering over her. He stared down at her for what felt like an eternity. The silence in the throne room was so absolute, she could hear the snow lashing against the high glass windows. "You asked me to hide you," Cassian finally spoke, his tone completely unreadable. "You ask the King of the North to cower a victim in the shadows while a petty, arrogant alpha plays God in the South." Panic seized her chest. "No, Your Majesty. I only meant—" "Captain Miller," Cassian barked, cutting her off. "Yes, my king. Send a raven to the Iron Ridge Pack. Inform Alpha Gideon that his missing property has been found." Sylvie's heart stopped. The air vanished from her lungs. No, he was sending her back. He was going to hand her over to Gideon to be slaughtered. "Please," she choked out, scrambling forward and grabbing the hem of his dark cloak. "Please, kill me here. Do not send me back to him. I will die anyway. Please just kill me yourself." Cassian looked down at her hands, clutching his royal garments, an offense punishable by death. But he didn't strike her. Instead, a slow, dark, and utterly terrifying smile curved his lips. "Who said anything about sending you back, little wolf?" Cassian asked softly. He reached down, taking her hands in his, and pulled her effortlessly to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but he gripped her waist to steady her. "Gideon Blackwood thinks he can manipulate the sacred bonds. He thinks he can hoard armies and challenge my authority while keeping his true mate as a tortured secret," Cassian said, his silver eyes flashing with predatory anticipation. "If I hide you, I validate his power. I prove that he is something to be feared." Cassian reached up and brushed a stray lock of dull hair from her face. "I will not hide you, Sylvie Mercer. I am going to make you the most visible woman in the realm." Cassian turned his gaze to Captain Miller. "The Raven will state that the Lycan King has claimed the Omega, Sylvie Mercer, as his royal consort. Gideon has 14 days to attend the Winter Court to officially surrender his claim, or I will consider his broken bond an act of war and march the Lycan army on Iron Ridge." Miller's eyes widened in shock, but he bowed deeply. "At once, Your Majesty." Sylvie stared at the king, her mind fracturing under the weight of his words. "Royal, consort, but I am dying. The bond. A half-bond tied by a mere alpha can be overwritten," Cassian said, stepping closer. The scent of ozone and winter pine wrapped around her, drowning out the lingering stench of Gideon's rejection. "If a Lycan King claims you, the old bond is incinerated. It will hurt, Sylvie. It will feel like burning alive. But when you wake, you will no longer belong to Gideon Blackwood." He raised his hand, tracing his thumb over her trembling lower lip. "You begged me to hide you from your mate," Cassian whispered, his silver eyes glowing. "I am going to do you one better. I am going to make him bow to you. Do we have a bargain?" She looked into the eyes of the monster the world feared, and for the first time in her life, she felt a spark of true, dangerous hope. "Yes," she breathed. "The overriding of a mate bond is forbidden in most pacts because it is universally fatal. When a wolf's soul is tethered, severing that rope violently and immediately splicing it to another is a shock the mortal body cannot endure. But Cassian Vane was not a mere wolf, and his bloodline carried the ancient primordial magic of the first shifters. The ritual took place in the king's private sanctum, a circular chamber built directly over a natural hot spring deep beneath the castle. The air was thick with sulfur and the scent of crushed winter mint. Matilda Hughes, a stern but incredibly gentle Lycan healer with silver-braided hair, prepared the herbal salves that would keep Sylvie's mortal flesh from splitting during the transition. "Breathe, child," Matilda whispered, brushing a cool, damp cloth over Sylvie's feverish forehead. "The king's magic is a storm, but he will not let you drown. You must anchor yourself to him. If you pull away, the old bond will snap back and kill you instantly." Cassian entered the chamber stripped to the waist, revealing a torso heavily scarred from centuries of brutal warfare. The sheer power radiating from him made the very air hum. He waded into the steaming, mineral-rich water, his silver eyes fixed solely on her. "Are you ready, Sylvie?" he asked, his voice a low, soothing rumble that directly contrasted the terrifying act they were about to perform. She nodded, stepping into the scalding pool. Her body was incredibly weak. The blackened veins on her neck had spread to her collarbones, a roadmap of her impending death. Cassian pulled her flush against his chest. The contrast was shocking. Her skin was icy and decaying, while his was like a furnace. "Look at me," he commanded softly. "Do not close your eyes. Look at me, and do not let go." He tilted her head to expose the junction of her neck and shoulder, the exact spot where a mate mark belonged, the spot Gideon had brutally denied her. Cassian's jaw extended, his fangs elongating into terrifying, lethal points. He didn't hesitate. He sank his teeth deep into her flesh. The pain was apocalyptic. It wasn't just a physical bite. It was an invasion of her soul. Sylvie felt the agonizing, rotting tether of Gideon's half-severed bond flare up in defiance, a dark sludge trying to fight off a blinding, white-hot inferno. Cassian's lichen venom flooded her veins, a liquid fire that sought out the decay and incinerated it. She screamed, a raw, tearing sound that echoed off the stone walls. Her vision went entirely white. Every nerve ending in her body felt like it was being flayed open and stitched back together with lightning. She tried to thrash, tried to pull away from the blinding agony, but Cassian's massive arms locked around her like iron bands. "Anchor yourself," Matilda's words echoed in her fracturing mind. She dug her nails into Cassian's shoulders, burying her face in his chest, and focused on the steady, thunderous beating of his heart. "Mine." A voice thundered in her mind, ancient and terrifying. It wasn't just a claim of territory. It was a shield of absolute, impenetrable protection. The dark tether snapped. Sylvie collapsed against him, gasping for air as the inferno slowly receded into a deep, vibrating warmth. The suffocating weight on her chest, the sickness that had been slowly crushing her lungs for a month, was gone. In its place was a golden, pulsing thread that connected her very essence to the Lichen King holding her. She slept for 3 days. When she finally awoke in a massive feather bed, the reflection in the gilded mirror across the room belonged to a stranger. The sickly gray pallor was gone, replaced by a radiant, flushed complexion. Her hair, once dull and thinning, tumbled over her shoulders in thick, glossy waves. The dark veins were entirely erased, leaving only a perfect, silver-scarred crescent on her neck, the royal mark of the Winter Court. But the physical transformation was nothing compared to the mental shift. Cassian didn't treat her like a rescued pet. Over the next 12 days, he treated her like a weapon he was sharpening for war. They spent hours in his war room. Guided by her photographic memory, Master Scribe Arthur Pendleton transcribed hundreds of pages of ledgers. Sylvie mapped out Gideon's illegal iron mines in the Whispering Valleys. She detailed the exact sums of gold he had embezzled from the unified treasury. She exposed the secret correspondence between Lady Beatrice's father and rogue mercenaries, proving their marriage was a political staging ground to overthrow the regional council. "He thinks in straight lines," she told Cassian one evening, tracing a tactical map on the heavy oak table. "He views loyalty as a transaction. He won't believe you've truly claimed me. He'll think this is a bluff to extort a heavier tax from Iron Ridge." Cassian leaned against the table, a dark smirk playing on his lips. "And what will he do when he realizes it's not a bluff, my clever little wolf?" "He will demand the right of ancient reclamation," she replied, her pulse steady. "He will claim I stole pack secrets and demand I be returned for trial. He will try to use the law against you to save face in front of his new bride's army." Cassian reached out, his knuckles brushing her cheek. "Then we will let him walk directly into the trap he built." On the 14th day, the horns of the Winter Court sounded, echoing across the frozen tundra. Alpha Gideon Blackwood had arrived. He didn't come as a penitent vassal. He came as a conqueror. He brought 50 elite guards from Iron Ridge and a contingent of Silver Pine warriors, their polished armor gleaming arrogantly in the pale winter sun. Lady Beatrice rode beside him in a carriage lined with rare furs. Sylvie stood beside Cassian in the great hall, her heart hammering against her ribs, but the golden thread of their bond pulsed with steadying calm. She was dressed not in an Omega's rags, but in a gown of deep midnight velvet embroidered with silver thread. The heavy fur mantle of the Lichen Queen draped over her shoulders. A delicate crown of forged dark steel rested on her head. The massive obsidian doors swung open. Gideon strode in, his chin held high, radiating the suffocating alpha command that used to drive her to her knees. Beatrice sneered at the icy austerity of the hall, clinging to his arm. They walked to the center of the room and stopped before the dais. Gideon bowed a shallow, disrespectful dip of his head. "King Cassian," Gideon's voice boomed, dripping with false diplomacy. "I received your raven. I must admit, I am baffled by this petty extortion. To summon me here over a runaway servant who stole from my ledgers is beneath the crown. Return the thief to me, name your price for the inconvenience, and let us be done with this charade." Cassian sat perfectly still on his throne of bone and shadow. "You speak of a thief, Alpha Blackwood. I summoned you here regarding my royal consort," Gideon scoffed, stepping forward. Do not play games with me, Vayne. She is a broken Omega. A useless, defective creature that couldn't even withstand a simple severing. Hand her over. He finally looked up, his pale blue eyes landing on the woman standing beside the king. The silence that followed was absolute. Sylvie watched the blood drain entirely from Gideon's face. His jaw went slack, his eyes widening in a mixture of horror, disbelief, and a sudden violent spark of possessiveness. He took in the radiant glow of her skin, the crown on her head, and the unmistakable potent scent of a fully actualized lichen royal radiating from her pulse points. "Sylvie?" he breathed, stumbling a half-step forward. The alpha command evaporated from his posture. That is impossible. You were dying." "I was," she said. Her voice didn't shake. It rang clear and cold across the massive hall, until the king showed me what a true alpha looks like. Beatrice's face contorted in fury. "You dare speak to your alpha that way, you filthy scullery maid?" "She speaks as a queen." Cassian's voice dropped an octave, the sheer force of his lichen aura slamming into the room. Several of Gideon's elite guards fell to their knees instantly, gasping for air. "You will address her as your grace, or I will have your tongue removed, Lady Beatrice." Gideon's shock rapidly morphed into desperate rage. He realized the political catastrophe unfolding. If she was the king's consort, the secrets she held were now the crown's. "This is illegal," Gideon roared, pointing a trembling finger at Cassian. "She is my fated mate. The goddess bound us. You cannot overwrite a true bond. It is a violation of the sacred laws. I demand the right of reclamation. She belongs to Iron Ridge." Cassian slowly stood up. The relaxed posture vanished, replaced by the lethal predator that had conquered the north. He descended the stairs of the dais, each footstep sounding like a war drum. "You invoke the sacred laws?" Cassian asked, his voice deceptively soft. He signaled with his hand. Captain Miller stepped forward, carrying a massive stack of leather-bound ledgers, dropping them onto the stone floor at Gideon's feet with a heavy thud. "Scribe Arthur Pendleton has verified these accounts," Cassian stated. "They detail your illegal iron mines in the Whispering Valleys. They detail the 300,000 gold pieces you embezzled from the Unified Treasury. They detail your treasonous correspondence with the rogue mercenaries of the Blood Moon sect." Gideon stared at the ledgers, a visible sweat breaking out on his forehead. Forgeries. Lies crafted by a spiteful, rejected whore. Cassian was in front of him in a blur of motion too fast for the human eye. He didn't shift into his wolf form. He didn't need to. Cassian wrapped one massive hand around Gideon's throat and lifted the towering alpha off the ground as easily as lifting a child. Gideon choked, clawing desperately at Cassian's iron grip, his legs kicking in the air. "You threw her away because you thought she was weak," Cassian whispered, his silver eyes glowing with lethal intent. "You thought her an Omega. But you are a fool, Gideon. The goddess did not pair her with you to serve you. She paired her with you to test you. And you failed." Cassian dropped Gideon to the floor. The alpha collapsed, coughing and gasping for breath, completely humiliated in front of his new bride and his warriors. "The overwrite did not just break your pathetic half-bond," Cassian continued, turning to look back at Sylvie, his eyes softening only for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "It awakened the dormant lichen bloodline of her ancestors. She is not an Omega. She is a true lichen, and my fated queen." A collective gasp echoed through the hall. Even Sylvie inhaled sharply. Cassian hadn't told her that part. The sheer rarity of a dormant lichen gene awakening was the stuff of legends. Cassian looked down at the pathetic man on the floor. "Gideon Blackwood, for the crimes of high treason, embezzlement, and the attempted murder of a royal lichen, you are stripped of your alpha title. Your lands are forfeit to the crown. You will spend the rest of your miserable, extended life in the deep ice mines of the northern reaches." Beatrice screamed as the Winter Court guards swarmed forward, dragging a sobbing, begging Gideon to his feet. He locked eyes with Sylvie one last time as they pulled him toward the heavy obsidian doors. "Sylvie!" he screamed, his voice cracking with terror. "Sylvie, please, tell him we are mates, have mercy!" She stood tall, the velvet of her gown sweeping the floor as she stepped to the edge of the dais. She looked down at the man who had shattered her bones and left her to rot in the dark. "I am Sylvie Vayne," she said softly, yet the acoustics of the hall carried every syllable, and the Winter Court has no mercy for traitors. As the doors slammed shut behind him, sealing his fate forever, Cassian walked back up the stairs. He didn't take his throne. Instead, He stopped beside her, intertwining his large, warm hand with hers. The golden tether between their souls hummed a triumphant melody. She had walked into the snow, expecting to die in the shadows, but she had survived the frost, only to reign over the ice. Sylvie arrived at the winter court as a broken Omega, begging to be hidden in the shadows. Instead, a Lycan king dragged her into the light, broke her chains, and crowned her his equal. Gideon sought to destroy her for his ambition, but his cruelty only forged the very weapon of his undoing. True power isn't found in submission, but in the courage to rise from the ashes,